On October 14, 1871, 40 men gathered outside Greensboro, North Carolina, for an event that does not officially exist. According to county records, nothing unusual happened that night. No violence was reported. No arrests were made. No bodies were found. The paperwork describes it as a routine property inspection. And yet, by morning, 11 men were seriously wounded. One was dead, and several others would spend the rest of their lives refusing to speak about what they saw. The only person who remained uninjured was the woman they had come to confront. For the next 70 years, veterans whispered about her in private. Doctors denied knowing her. Records contradicted themselves. Entire hospital logs quietly disappeared. This is not a ghost story. It is a story about how a single, unnamed woman exploited the blind spots of an entire system, and how history worked very hard to make sure you never heard about it. Before we return to that barn and the blood it would never officially contain, we need to understand how the woman later called the Greensboro ghost was made. Her story does not begin in North Carolina. It begins 300 miles south, in a place where history was carefully edited to conceal a truth the war was never meant to reveal. Charleston County, South Carolina, carried a peculiar reputation, even among plantation societies. While other regions boasted of cotton yields or architectural grandeur, Charleston's elite spoke in quieter tones about something else entirely: their ability to break the unbreakable. Along the tidewater plantations bordering the Ashley River, certain estates specialized in what they called rehabilitation. Enslaved people deemed too dangerous, too defiant, or too violent for other properties were sent there to be corrected, to be returned as something more useful, more obedient. The Havford Plantation, founded in 1789, was the crown jewel of this reputation. By 1862, it belonged to Colonel Augustus Havford, a man whose name traveled faster than he did through slave markets across the South. He paid premium prices for what others considered lost causes. Runaways captured multiple times, people who had struck overseers, anyone he described as possessing excessive spirit. His success was recorded with cold precision. Ledgers documenting not a single escape attempt from Havford property in 23 years. The plantation itself was designed to enforce that certainty. Swampland choked 3 sides of the property. The Ashley River sealed the 4th. Only 2 roads led in or out, both visible from the Widow's Walk atop the main house. The woman who would become the Greensboro ghost arrived at Havford Plantation on March 3, 1862. Her original name has been erased so completely that even fragments do not survive. The bill of sale listed her only as approximately 19 years old, previously property of Beaufort County Estate, liquidated. History of violence toward overseers. Sold as is. She had killed a man at Beaufort. Everyone knew it. No charges were filed. Enslaved people could not legally murder white men. They could only damage property. The widow who owned her had sold quickly, before more damage could be done. Colonel Havford inspected her like livestock. 5 feet 8 inches tall, unusually large for a woman of any race in that era. Hands marked by calluses that did not come from cotton or housework, but something else. Her left eye carried a permanent cast from a beating that never healed properly, giving her a gaze that unsettled even seasoned overseers. She did not look down when white men spoke to her. That was her first mistake at Havford. The colonel ensured it would be her last for some time. Rehabilitation followed a precise system. New arrivals spent their first month inside the training house, a brick structure separated from the quarters. Colonel Havford oversaw it personally. No one knew what occurred within those walls. Those who emerged never spoke of it. They worked, they obeyed, they survived. The woman entered the training house on March 4th. She emerged 31 days later, altered in ways that satisfied the colonel completely. She was assigned to the field gangs under an overseer named Cyrus Pitchford, a man known less for cruelty than efficiency. By plantation standards, that meant he used the whip sparingly, only when necessary. Pitchford noted her compliance and her unnatural endurance. She worked longer hours than men twice her size. She never complained, never slowed. By summer, she was reassigned to skilled labor in the plantation's medical facility. This is where official history begins to blur. Like many large estates, Havford maintained a sick house where enslaved workers recovered just enough to return to the fields. A white physician visited twice weekly. Day-to-day care was handled by enslaved workers with aptitude for medical tasks. The woman from Beaufort displayed an understanding of anatomy that bordered on the uncanny. She set bones cleanly, recognized illnesses before symptoms fully manifested, knew precisely which herbs treated which conditions. When asked where she had learned such things, she never answered. Not in defiance, but in silence that felt absolute. Colonel Havford recognized value when it benefited him. By August 1862, she worked almost exclusively in the sick house. He even provided medical texts, carefully chosen to teach treatment without encouraging literacy beyond basic Latin terms. She absorbed everything. Her intensity made the visiting physician, Dr. Marcus Bellingham, uneasy. Her questions revealed comprehension that should not have existed in someone without formal training. Then the war arrived at Havford's gates. By late 1862, Confederate optimism had rotted into desperation. Casualties overwhelmed hospitals. Plantations with medical facilities were quietly converted into field hospitals. Havford's sick house followed in November. On November 19th, 17 wounded Confederate soldiers arrived from a skirmish near Pocataligo that official records barely acknowledge. The sick house, built for 8, now held more than double. Dr. Bellingham was immediately overwhelmed. Civilian medicine had not prepared him for mini-balls embedded in bone, infections blooming in humid air, organs exposed to insects and decay. For 3 days, the woman from Beaufort did not sleep. She moved through the wounded with impossible efficiency. She knew who required immediate attention, who could wait, who would not survive. She extracted bullets with steady hands while men screamed. What disturbed Bellingham most was her demeanor, not resentment, not submission, but clinical detachment, as though she were examining animals, not men fighting for her captivity. On the 4th day, Private Edmund Vickers developed fever, confusion, a racing pulse. Bellingham dismissed it as routine infection. Standard treatments were applied: willow bark, laudanum, cool compresses. The woman said nothing, but when the doctor left, she watched Vickers with an expression 2 nearby soldiers later struggled to describe. They saw her adjust something in his care. Too fast to identify. Too subtle. Vickers died that night. Bellingham attributed it to sepsis. No one questioned it. Men died constantly. Survival rates hovered around 40%. 3 days later, Corporal James Lindsay developed the same symptoms. He died within 18 hours. The woman prepared his body herself. By December, 12 of the original 17 soldiers were dead. 7 of them should have lived. 3 had been officers. More wounded arrived in January 1863. The pattern continued. The death rate did not raise alarms because it matched other hospitals across the collapsing South. What no one noticed was who died, and who did not. Captain Theodore Winscott arrived in February with a clean leg wound. He had once worked as a pharmacist's assistant. On his third night, medicated but awake, he watched her prepare his laudanum. He saw the pause, the glance toward the door, the addition from an unlabeled bottle kept in her apron. He pretended to swallow, spat it into his bedding. His fever broke by morning. Dr. Bellingham praised Providence. Winscott began to watch her. He saw her linger over certain patients, rush through others, saw the bottles, heard claims of approval that had never been given. When he warned Colonel Havford, he was dismissed. A slave could not commit such acts. The idea itself was absurd. 2 weeks after Winscott's departure, Lieutenant Hornsby died suddenly. Private Strickland followed, paralyzed and suffocating. Spring brought more casualties, more buildings converted, more trust placed in the woman from Beaufort, and more deaths that blended seamlessly into the background noise of war. No one was looking for a pattern, and so for now, no one saw it. The spring of 1863 arrived with no relief. As fighting intensified across the Carolinas, Havford Plantation's medical operation expanded again. A tobacco barn was converted, an overseer's cottage stripped and repurposed. Dr. Bellingham could no longer oversee everything himself. Increasingly, the woman from Beaufort became the axis around which the entire operation turned. Colonel Havford, sensing opportunity, began inviting local officials and military men to tour the facility. He spoke proudly of his contribution to the Confederate cause. He showcased the woman as proof of loyal, productive slaves. She never spoke during these visits. She demonstrated. He supervised. The deaths continued. They did not stand out because everywhere else was just as bad. Infection, gangrene, fever. Hospitals across the South reported similar losses. But Havford was different in ways no one wanted to examine. Officers died more often than enlisted men. Educated soldiers more than illiterate ones. Men from wealthy families more than poor farmers pulled into service against their will. The pattern was subtle, almost elegant in its restraint. In August 1863, a Union raid disrupted supply lines near Charleston. Confederate authorities relocated Havford's patients to a military hospital in Columbia. For 6 weeks, the plantation's sick house returned to treating enslaved workers only. During that time, something changed. Colonel Havford noted increased productivity, fewer illnesses, faster recoveries, no unexplained deaths. Meanwhile, the military hospital in Columbia reported no unusual mortality among transferred patients. Some soldiers who had been failing at Havford improved once moved. An Army surgeon, Dr. Nathaniel Grayson, mentioned this in passing. Better facilities, he concluded. More experienced staff. He did note that several patients described an unease they had felt at the plantation hospital. None could articulate why. When Confederate casualties returned to Havford in October, the deaths resumed immediately. Major Robert Cunningham was the first, a plantation owner from Georgia, wounded but stable. He spent evenings lecturing others about discipline and punishment. He died over 2 days as his organs failed one by one. The woman from Beaufort attended him through the end. Water, pillows, quiet presence. In his final moments, Cunningham recognized something in her eyes, tried to speak, could not. She closed his eyes without trembling. By December 1863, 87 Confederate soldiers had died at Havford. No investigation followed. The Confederate medical department was drowning. Every hospital looked like a disaster if examined too closely. What no one could have known without exhumations and sciences that did not yet exist, was method. Over 16 months, the woman from Beaufort refined a system. Deaths slow enough to resemble disease, fast enough to prevent recovery, oleander for the heart, water hemlock for the nerves, pokeweed for the gut. Each case unique, each fatal. Winter brought the beginning of the end. Colonel Hafford's liver finally failed. As he deteriorated through early 1864, control passed to his wife, Elena Hafford. She had trusted her husband's systems. She trusted the woman. Then her son returned home. Lieutenant Charles Hafford arrived in March with a minor arm wound. It should have healed easily. Instead, fever came and went in baffling cycles. The woman brought him special teas. Mrs. Hafford watched her son weaken day by day. On the 7th night, delirious, Charles grabbed the woman's wrist and whispered, "You're killing me, like you killed the others." The woman did not answer, but her silence was enough. Mrs. Hafford saw what her husband never had: the pattern, the satisfaction that flickered and vanished when certain patients died. She barred the woman from treating her son alone. Charles recovered within days. Mrs. Hafford spent the next 2 weeks reviewing records her husband had kept with obsessive care. The numbers were undeniable once examined without loyalty. 143 soldiers treated, 94 dead. When broken down further, the truth sharpened. Officers died at nearly 80%, wealthy men over 70, educated men almost the same, poor laborers barely a third. The woman had been waging a quiet war against the Confederacy's leadership. Mrs. Hafford confronted Dr. Bellingham. At first, he defended himself. Then the cases piled up. Minor wounds, sudden collapses, discrepancies between prescribed treatments and what had been administered. Small changes made quietly, confidently, over months. The realization broke him. He wanted authorities notified, but there was no mechanism. Enslaved people were property. Property could not commit murder. The system itself had shielded her. Mrs. Hafford faced a different calculus. Exposure would destroy the family name. Confiscation, ruin, isolation. 94 dead soldiers weighed against generations of standing. On April 2nd, 1864, she decided. The field hospital would close. Remaining patients transferred. Dr. Bellingham would resign. The woman would be sold immediately, far away, with her history erased. Records would be quietly adjusted. Dr. Bellingham agreed. The woman was told on April 5th. She showed no reaction, packed her few belongings, waited. Mrs. Hafford watched from the window, trying to comprehend the calm of someone who had killed so patiently. The woman never looked back at the graves. The trader arrived on April 8th. Jasper Crenshaw specialized in difficult sales. Mrs. Hafford told him only that the woman had become unsuitable. No mention of medicine, no mention of deaths. He had a buyer in Tennessee. She was sold for $800, less than her worth. More than Mrs. Hafford cared about. On April 10th, 1864, the woman left Hafford in chains, 25 months and 13 days after her arrival. 94 Confederate soldiers dead. The wagon never reached Tennessee. Crenshaw's body was found 8 days later in a ravine west of Columbia. His throat had been cut with precise knowledge of anatomy. The wagon and horses were gone. So was the woman. Authorities noted it briefly. Sherman's army was coming. One dead traitor did not matter. What followed exists only in fragments. Reports of soldiers found dead without battle. Patrols that vanished. Officers who died in their sleep. Always small numbers. Always explainable. No one considered the possibility of a woman moving freely with forged papers, offering medical aid to desperate men. Except one man did. Captain Theodore Winscott encountered her again in September 1864 near Atlanta. She called herself Sarah Bridgewell, a free black nurse displaced by war. Her papers were convincing, her skills undeniable. He recognized her immediately. When he mentioned Hafford, something passed between them. "You know what I am," she said quietly. He arrested her, officially. She escaped by morning. The sergeant guarding her was found burned 2 days later. Winscott reported the escape. He did not report Hafford. In his journal years later, he admitted why. Turning her in would not stop her. It would only make her more careful. The war ended soon after. Records scattered. Investigations died with the Confederacy, and the woman vanished. For 6 years, there was no trace. Then, in October 1871, whispers began again. They came out of North Carolina first as rumors, then as uneasy confirmations. A black woman living alone near Greensboro. Tall, quiet, a slight cast to her left eye. She owned land, no husband, no visible means of support. She kept to herself in a way that unsettled people who could not explain why. Veterans sometimes thought they recognized her. A former lieutenant swore she had nearly killed him with medicine during the war. A captain claimed she had worked in a Georgia hospital where men died too quickly. Their stories were dismissed. Defeated men looking for meaning in loss. But the Ku Klux Klan noticed her for a simpler reason: independence. A black woman who did not bow, did not defer, did not ask permission to exist. That alone was enough. They planned to make an example of her. The raid followed a template refined across the Reconstruction South. Enough men to overwhelm, not enough to draw attention. Burn her out, beat her, kill her if necessary. October 14th, 1871. A Saturday night. A message meant to linger into Sunday morning. 40 men assembled 3 miles from her property. White robes, torches, rifles. Most were former Confederate soldiers, men who had survived the war only to return to a world they no longer controlled. They surrounded the house at 11:30. A simple structure. One lamp burning. She was awake. The door opened before they reached it. She stood in the lamplight, unarmed, studying them the way she once studied wounded men. "Evening," she said. "I wondered when you'd come." Their leader stepped forward. Orders were given, threats delivered. Then she moved. What happened next fractured the confidence of 40 men in seconds. A rifle reversed. A face shattered. Another man dropped, breath stolen by a strike delivered with anatomical precision. The rest froze long enough for her to barricade herself inside. Gunfire followed. Bullets tore through walls. Return fire answered from different windows, not wild, deliberate. She had prepared. Men began to fall, knees shattered, hands destroyed, shots chosen to disable, not kill. The realization spread slowly and then all at once. She could have ended them. She was choosing not to. The standoff lasted 4 hours. 11 men wounded, 1 dead, their leader unconscious. When the barn was set ablaze, the fire illuminated the truth. This was not terror. This was a battle they were losing. One man stepped forward and surrendered. He knew her from the war. He understood what she was. She emerged at last, rifle lowered but ready. She named the dead, counted them, spoke calmly of numbers and consequences. "Go home," she said. "Tell them the Greensboro ghost is real." They did. By morning, the only evidence was a burned shed. Official records listed nothing unusual. Injuries were explained away. Silence held. But silence fractures. Stories spread in back rooms and veterans' halls of a woman who moved too fast, who shot like a surgeon, of hospitals where patients died under her care. Major Wayne Winscott heard them. He recognized the pattern. In his journals, he recorded accounts from across the South. Descriptions matched too precisely to ignore. He cross-referenced surviving records, mortality spikes, officer deaths, dates aligning with sightings he never published. The truth threatened the mythology of noble defeat and loyal slaves. The woman remained near Greensboro for 3 more years. No one challenged her directly. Instead, bureaucracy crept in. Property disputes, moral suspicions, paper weapons meant to do what violence had failed to accomplish. In 1874, 3 black community leaders came to her. They spoke carefully. Reconstruction was ending. Protection was fading. Her presence endangered others now. She listened, asked one question, then understood. She sold the land cheaply, left quietly. After that, she dissolved into fragments. A midwife in Philadelphia, a healer in Chicago, a rumor of Liberia. No census, no certificate. Nothing that could fix her in place. Confederate veterans groups issued denials so specific they betrayed fear. Dr. Bellingham's papers surfaced too late to matter. Mrs. Hafford's secrets died with her. Historians eventually circled the truth without naming it fully. Statistical anomalies, resistance dismissed as impossible. What remains is this: someone existed who exploited the blind spots of an inhuman system. Someone patient enough to wait years. Someone who understood that medicine and murder could share the same hands. The last trace comes from a physician's letter in 1901. An elderly black woman with knowledge beyond explanation. When asked where she learned it, she smiled and said, "The war taught me everything." History prefers clean narratives, heroes and villains clearly marked. The Greensboro ghost does not fit. She lingers in gaps, in records altered and memories suppressed. And perhaps that is where she intended to stay.